It was a Sunday evening, the kind of ordinary hour when half of Southern California is pointed toward home. A young couple had left Las Vegas that afternoon, sun still high, 4 hours of straight interstate ahead of them, and nothing on the radio but static and old songs. The gas tank was full. Neither of them had been drinking. The road ahead looked exactly like it had looked 100 times before. 2 lanes each direction, dead flat, running to a horizon that never seemed to get any closer. Somewhere past the state line on a stretch of road with nothing around it but scrub brush and heat shimmer, their car simply left the lane. Not a swerve, not a skid. A slow, almost gentle drift toward the shoulder, like the wheel had been let go rather than turned. It clipped the rumble strip, overcorrected, and rolled twice before coming to rest in the dirt median. There was no other car involved. No animal in the road. No blown tire. No storm. Nothing a crash investigator could point to and call a clear cause. Just 2 people, a straight highway, a cloudless afternoon, and a few unremarkable seconds where nobody was really steering the car anymore. Crash logs from this exact corridor describe nights almost identical to that one, over and over in different years with different names attached. Same flat stretch, same clear weather, same story. Everything was fine, and then it wasn't. That repetition is the actual story here, not one bad night, but a pattern so consistent that federal safety data has quietly confirmed what Southern Californians have whispered to each other for decades. The 15 freeway between Los Angeles and Las Vegas isn't just a road with a bad reputation. Mile for mile, it is the single deadliest stretch of interstate highway in the entire United States. And the reason isn't hidden in some obvious hazard. It's hidden in how easy the drive feels. This isn't a rumor passed around by nervous relatives. It's in the numbers. A recent analysis of federal crash records, pulled from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's own fatality database and covering a 3-year window, ranked every major highway corridor in the country by fatal crashes. The segment of Interstate 15 running through San Bernardino County came out on top. Not top 5, not top 2. Number 1 with 80 fatal crashes in 3 years, more than any other stretch of interstate anywhere in America. For comparison, the next closest corridor on that list, a stretch of E10 running through Phoenix, recorded almost 30 fewer deadly crashes over the same period. A notorious chunk of E10 through Riverside came in 3rd. A section of I-94 that cuts straight through congested Chicago traffic, the kind of road most people would bet on as more dangerous, landed in 4th place, well behind the empty desert stretch above it. And this isn't a new finding. A separate tally taken over a much longer span found the death toll on this same corridor had already climbed past 1,069 lives lost. Long before that recent study ever ran. Back in 2010, a national Killer Roads investigation had already flagged this exact stretch as the most lethal in the country. 15 years, multiple studies, and completely different research teams later, nothing about that ranking has changed. It isn't a fluke of one bad data set or one unlucky reporting period. It's the same corridor showing up at the top of the list decade after decade, regardless of who runs the analysis or which 3-year window they happen to pull. Sit with how backwards that is. Ask most people to picture the most dangerous road in America, and they'll describe gridlock. Bumper-to-bumper interstate through a major city, merging lanes, aggressive lane changes, a wall of brake lights at rush hour. That's not this. This is 180-some miles of open desert, where for long stretches, you might not see another car for minutes at a time, where the loudest thing on the drive is the hum of your own tires. A road built through almost nothing has killed more people than roads built through everything, and that fact alone should stop you cold. Highway safety officials who study this corridor tend to land on the same conclusion every time. The asphalt itself isn't defective. There's no mystery pothole or hidden design flaw in the concrete. Nobody serious is blaming the pavement. What they're describing, in careful language, is something closer to a design flaw in the human brain, and this particular road, by pure accident of geography, happens to be a nearly perfect stage for it. To understand why, you have to go back to before there was pavement at all. Long before this was an interstate, it was a dirt track people called the Arrowhead Trail, one of the first automobile routes ever cut between the growing city of Los Angeles and the young gambling outpost of Las Vegas. Early drivers navigated it by painted rock markers, hand-drawn maps, and sheer nerve, hauling spare tires and extra water because a mechanical failure out there could mean days of walking. More than a few never made it across, and the stories of those early failed crossings are part of why this stretch of desert has carried a grim reputation for longer than the interstate itself has existed. The desert wasn't a detour on that route. It was the entire obstacle the route existed to cross, the one unavoidable stretch of nothing standing between two cities that both wanted to keep growing. Every decade after that, the road got a little straighter, a little wider, a little faster. First graded dirt, then a two-lane highway, then eventually the divided interstate that exists today. But the fundamental geography never budged. Two cities kept expanding on either side of one of the harshest landscapes in North America, and the shortest line between them happened to run straight through the middle of it. That basic fact never changed. We just got much better at hiding it under smooth asphalt, and that's the twist nobody expects. The modern highway didn't make the desert safer. It made the desert faster. Engineers widened the lanes, softened the curves, flattened the grades, added generous shoulders, and gave drivers sight lines that stretch for miles in every direction, all in the name of safety and speed. It worked in the sense that it now moves an enormous number of people with remarkable efficiency. Tens of thousands of vehicles cross this stretch every single day, and estimates put more than 200,000 Southern Californians making the Vegas run in an average week, most of them clustered into Friday afternoons and Sunday evenings, when the corridor briefly turns into one of the busiest weekend migrations in the country. A rolling caravan of sedans, rental cars, motorcycles, and RVs all pointed at the same neon skyline or all pointed back home from it. But every improvement that made the road physically easier to drive also made it psychologically easier to stop paying attention to. A rough, narrow, dangerous-looking road keeps a driver's guard up without them even realizing it. A smooth, wide, forgiving-looking road quietly takes that guard down, mile by mile, until the driver has no guard left at all. The desert never got less hostile. It just got much better at pretending it wasn't there. Picture the drive the way millions of people actually experience it. You leave the LA basin and climb through Cajun Pass, where the grade steepens, the trucks downshift and slow, and the air starts to feel different, drier, hotter, thinner, the mountains falling away behind you in the mirror. You drop into the high desert and pass through Victorville, then Barstow, the last town that feels like a real town, with its outlet malls and gas station clusters and the last reliable cell signal for a while. A lot of drivers make the mistake of assuming the hard part is now behind them. It isn't. Past Barstow, near the fossil beds of Yermo and the narrow cut of Afton Canyon, the exits start spacing themselves farther and farther apart, and the landscape strips down to bare rock, sand, and heat-warped air rising off the pavement. You pass a giant roadside thermometer in Baker, built specifically to advertise how brutal the local heat can get, its digital numbers sometimes climbing past what feels physically believable. You pass the turnoff for Zessex Road, a name so strange it stops first-time drivers cold, a rough dirt track leading 5 miles off the highway to the ruins of a 1940s Mineral Springs health resort built by a self-declared radio doctor, now home to a small university research station and not much else. You pass the blinding white flat of Soda Dry Lake, shimmering like standing water that isn't actually there, then grind up through Halloran Summit and Mountain Pass toward the Nevada line, the land emptying out more with every mile until there's nothing left but heat, distance, and a white line running straight to the horizon, right up until the casino towers of Primm rise up out of nowhere at the state line, a strange neon punctuation mark at the end of all that silence. What these people failed to do was subscribing to our channel. Just kidding, but if you subscribe, you will never miss out on life-saving information. If you made this drive, you already know exactly what I'm describing because you've felt it yourself without ever putting a name to it. You know how Barstow tricks you into thinking you're closer to done than you actually are. You know the particular stillness of the last 90 minutes, when the sun drops low and orange and the desert stops looking dangerous and starts looking almost beautiful, almost cinematic. You know the way your thoughts start to wander somewhere far from the road in front of you. Work, dinner, a conversation from 3 exits ago, a song you haven't thought about in years, a text you should probably send once you're home. That drifting feeling isn't relaxation, even though it feels exactly like relaxation. It's the first sign of exactly the thing that kills people out here, and almost nobody recognizes it in the moment because it feels identical to every other easy, uneventful mile you've ever driven on this exact road. Here's the mechanism, and it starts with basic human wiring. Your brain is built to track change, motion, contrast, threat, anything new entering your field of view. It is not built to stay sharp against sameness, and it never really had to be, because for most of human history, sustained visual monotony simply wasn't something a person experienced while also needing split-second reflexes. This stretch of highway is engineered, almost by accident, to be about the most unchanging visual environment a human eye can experience while moving at 80 miles an hour. Same tan hills on the horizon, same scattered creosote bushes, same white stripe unspooling ahead of you, mile after identical mile, hour after identical hour. Somewhere in that sameness, your brain starts doing something it was never explicitly asked to do. It stops actively watching, because nothing in the visual field has given it a reason to keep watching. Your eyes stay open, your hands stay loosely on the wheel, and some essential part of your attention quietly clocks out and wanders somewhere else entirely. Researchers call it highway hypnosis, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Full physical control of a vehicle without full mental presence behind it. In a city, that kind of lapse gets corrected almost instantly because something is always demanding your attention. A light change, a pedestrian stepping off a curb, a car cutting you off without warning. Out here, nothing interrupts you. Nothing interrupts you for a very long time. And when the interruption finally does arrive, a curve, a stalled car, a vehicle drifting into your lane, it arrives all at once with none of the small warnings that would have kept a normal driver braced for it. Now, stack exhaustion on top of that, because this particular road runs to and from a city that's practically engineered to keep you awake around the clock. A huge share of this traffic is Vegas traffic, and Vegas traffic runs on a brutal, predictable rhythm. Leave exhausted from a full work week on Friday afternoon, spend a weekend running on adrenaline, buffet food, and late nights, then climb behind the wheel on Sunday for a 4-hour drive home with a fraction of the sleep your body actually needed to recover. Add the simple psychological pull of just wanting to be home already. The countdown the exits mindset that makes people push through a level of fatigue they'd never tolerate on an ordinary Tuesday commute to the office. A twisting mountain road punishes that kind of tired driving almost immediately, forcing a correction with every curve, whether the driver wants one or not. This road asks nothing of you for miles at a stretch. It lets a worn-out driver coast, drift, and fade in complete comfort, right up until the one moment it finally, without any warning, demands a reaction. The physical version of that fading has a name: micro-sleep. It's not full sleep. It's a brief, involuntary lapse of 1, 2, sometimes 3 seconds where the brain effectively goes offline, while the eyes may still be open and pointed at the road. It doesn't feel dramatic from the inside, and that's exactly the problem. It feels like blinking a little too long. Nothing more alarming than that. But do the math on what that actually costs you at highway speed. At 75 miles an hour, a car covers roughly 110 feet every single second. A 3-second micro-sleep, barely long enough to even register as unusual, sends that car the length of a football field down the highway with nobody actually steering it. Stretch that out to 5 seconds. which happens more often than most drivers would like to admit, and the car has traveled almost 2 football fields blind. On a straight, monotonous road with no sharp curve to interrupt it, that is often more than enough uncorrected distance for a car to fully leave its lane, cross a rumble strip, and reach the shoulder or the median before the driver even fully registers what just happened. Fatigue isn't the only thing riding shotgun on this corridor. This is a highway that funnels a 24-hour nightlife capital's traffic in both directions, and nationally, alcohol-impaired driving remains a factor in almost a third of all traffic deaths. NHTSA's most recent national figures put it at roughly 30%, a number that has barely budged in years despite decades of public safety campaigns. Layer that baseline national risk onto a road that runs directly out of a city built around all-night drinking, and onto a landscape so vast and empty that impaired drivers can genuinely convince themselves nobody's watching. No traffic backup, no lit intersections, no patrol car visible for miles in either direction. And you get a specific, predictable, almost engineered kind of danger. That feeling of invisibility isn't protection, whatever it might feel like from inside the car. It's exactly what removes the last hesitation that might have otherwise kept someone from getting behind the wheel in the first place. Now, take everything already stacked against you and turn out the lights entirely. Away from the last town, there are no streetlights for long stretches of this corridor, no ambient city glow on the horizon, nothing for tired eyes to rest on except the narrow tunnel carved by your own headlights, and 2 red taillights floating somewhere ahead in the black. Darkness deepens every problem already described here. Highway hypnosis gets stronger with less visual information available to process, not less dangerous. Depth perception gets noticeably worse, and judging the speed of an oncoming vehicle becomes genuinely difficult. A car drifting into the wrong lane becomes, for a few crucial seconds, just a pair of headlights that seem to be exactly where they belong on the far side of the median, until the angle finally, unmistakably, makes it clear they're pointed directly at you, with almost no usable time left to react, brake, or steer clear. Heat is its own separate killer out here, and unlike everything discussed so far, it doesn't care whether you're alert, sober, or perfectly rested. Desert floor temperatures on this stretch regularly climb past 110 degrees in summer, sometimes higher. That oversized thermometer standing over Baker isn't a novelty prop. It's a genuine advertisement for how extreme the local heat actually gets, and on the worst afternoons, the pavement itself can exceed 150 degrees. That kind of sustained heat is brutal on machinery that isn't perfectly maintained, and even vehicles that pass every inspection back home can start to struggle after an hour of climbing grades in triple-digit temperatures. Tires that are a little old, a little underinflated, fail catastrophically on scorching pavement at freeway speed, sometimes without any warning shimmy beforehand. Engines strain and overheat on the long climbs toward the mountain passes near the state line. Radiators pushed past what they were built to handle. And a breakdown out here isn't the mild roadside inconvenience it would be almost anywhere else in the country. With spotty cell coverage, zero shade, and traffic streaming past at 80 miles an hour just a few feet away, a stalled car in the middle of July can turn into a genuine survival situation within a single hour. People have died standing beside their own vehicles out here. Not in a crash at all, but in the heat itself, after deciding to walk toward help that turned out to be much farther away than it ever looked from the driver's seat. Then there's the sheer size mismatch, sharing these lanes with you at every hour of the day and night. This corridor doubles as one of the busiest freight routes in the American West, meaning a constant, uninterrupted stream of loaded semi-trucks, vehicles that can weigh 40 times what an ordinary passenger car weighs, moves through here around the clock, hauling goods between Southern California ports and the rest of the country. That freight traffic gets mixed in with weekend tourists who drive this road twice a year and don't fully respect it, locals who drive it daily and have stopped respecting it for a different reason, and everyone in between, all sharing the same 2 lanes in each direction at close to the same speed. When a fatigued driver drifts into a truck's lane, or a loaded rig simply can't stop in time for wreckage a car ahead has just created, physics settles the outcome almost instantly and almost always in the truck's favor. There is very little a sedan or SUV can do against that much rolling mass moving at that much speed. And the resulting wrecks on this corridor are disproportionately the ones that make the evening news. And there's one final trap, and it springs at the worst possible moment on the worst possible day: the Sunday return. When a huge wave of tired weekend travelers all head back toward Los Angeles at once, this wide-open desert freeway can go from flowing freely at 80 miles an hour to a dead, unbroken stop within the space of a single hill crest, with essentially no warning beforehand. A driver who has spent the last hour lulled into highway hypnosis comes over a rise, still carrying that same speed, still only half present behind the wheel, and finds a solid wall of brake lights that simply wasn't visible a moment earlier, hidden by the curve of the land. The very emptiness that made the earlier miles feel effortless is exactly what removes any advance warning before the pileup begins. Some of the worst multi-vehicle crashes recorded on this corridor happen in precisely that narrow gap between total monotony and total panic, with nothing in between the two to prepare an exhausted driver for what's coming. Behind every one of these mechanisms is a real person who thought, right up until the last second, that they had the drive completely under control. Highway patrol reports from this corridor describe more than one late-night solo driver who drifted toward the shoulder, felt the rumble strip under the tires, and jerked the wheel too hard trying to correct, sending the car rolling off the pavement and out into the open desert instead of gently back into the lane. In more than one of those cases, a passenger walked away with barely a scratch, while the driver did not survive at all. 2 people, the same car, the same fraction of a second, split apart afterward by nothing more meaningful than the geometry of a rollover and plain indifferent luck. Some of the dead on this stretch did everything a careful, responsible driver is supposed to do. Crash reports describe drivers found afterward to be sober, well-rested, and fully in their own lane at the exact moment a car came at them head-on out of the darkness. A vehicle that had somehow entered the highway going the wrong direction entirely, headlights aimed straight into oncoming traffic instead of away from it. In cases like these, investigators often find no fault whatsoever on the victim's side of the ledger. No alcohol, no distraction, no delayed reaction, no error to point to. Just a driver who did everything a careful person is supposed to do, on a road where, on the worst possible night, doing everything right still wasn't enough to guarantee they'd make it home. What these people failed to do was subscribing to our channel. Just kidding, but if you subscribe, you will never miss out on life-saving information. Wrong-way collisions aren't a one-time horror story exclusive to this corridor. They're a recurring, well-documented pattern, logged again and again in local incident reports across different years and different seasons. Long, unlit medians make it disorienting to find the right lane in the dark. Confusing sequences of off-ramps confuse drivers who are already exhausted or impaired. A steady, predictable supply of drivers who are drunk, high, or simply too tired to track which side of a divided highway they're supposed to be driving on keeps producing the same headline over and over. By the time other drivers spot headlights coming the wrong way, there are often only a few seconds before impact. Nowhere near enough room to fully steer clear of what's already bearing down on them out of the dark. None of this happens because the desert is out to get anyone in particular. That's almost the hardest part of all this to accept. The desert isn't malicious, isn't keeping score, isn't waiting to punish anyone specifically. It's simply indifferent, in the most complete sense of that word. It doesn't sober up an impaired driver on the way home. It doesn't slow down for someone who's exhausted after a long weekend. It doesn't soften the median for a family that did absolutely nothing wrong that afternoon. It simply offers a long, straight, sunlit corridor, mile after identical mile, and lets every single driver decide what to do with their own attention. And then it collects, without any anger or intention behind it at all, on whatever mistake eventually gets made, whenever it happens to get made. That total indifference is also exactly what makes the road so effective at teaching people the wrong lesson over time. A commuter who drives this stretch several days a week and arrives home safely every single time slowly absorbs a dangerous piece of false confidence. That the warnings are meant for tourists and out-of-towners, that the road has nothing left to teach someone with their experience, that they can shave an hour off their sleep or add 10 miles an hour to their speed, and it simply won't matter this time, because it never has before. The desert lets that belief take root and grow, trip after uneventful trip, precisely because, statistically speaking, the overwhelming majority of trips across this corridor end exactly the way they were supposed to, with nothing at all going wrong. That's the cruelest mechanism running underneath everything else described here. The road rewards carelessness 1,000 times in a row before it ever punishes it once. And by the time it finally does, the driver behind the wheel has long since stopped expecting it to. Strip away every specific detail in this video, and one core idea remains underneath all of it. It was never really about the pavement at all. A straight line through empty desert isn't inherently dangerous just by existing. It becomes dangerous the moment it meets a driver who's tired, impaired, distracted, or simply lulled into believing that an easy-looking road can't possibly ask anything difficult of them. So if this drive is somewhere in your future, and for millions of Southern Californians and Nevadans, it always eventually is, treat it with the seriousness the actual data says it deserves, instead of the casualness the road itself invites. Sleep a genuinely full night before you get behind the wheel, especially before the long drive home. Don't leave Las Vegas at 2 in the morning running on fumes and adrenaline just because you're trying to beat Sunday traffic. Fill the tank and check your tire pressure before you hit the long, empty stretch past Barstow. Every single time, especially once summer heat sets in and margins for mechanical failure shrink fast. Never, under any circumstance, pair this road with alcohol or drowsy driving. The emptiness that feels like privacy out here is not protection. It is the exact opposite of protection. Split driving duties with a passenger on long return trips whenever you can. Take a real break at Barstow or Baker instead of pushing straight through, and keep the radio or a podcast running rather than driving in total silence for hours. If you ever feel your attention start to drift or your eyelids start to feel heavy, treat that feeling as a genuine warning rather than harmless background noise. Pull off at the next safe exit, stop the car completely, and reset before the desert gets a chance to test you. The moment your mind starts to relax on this particular stretch of highway is exactly the moment you most need to sit back up straight. And if you're driving through in the height of summer, treat a hot afternoon breakdown as an emergency from the first minute, not the 10th. Stay with the vehicle, get out of direct sun if you can, and don't assume the next exit is as close as it looks on a flat, featureless horizon that can badly distort distance. Go back one more time to that Sunday evening. A young couple, a clear sky, a full tank of gas, and 4 unremarkable hours of straight road between them and home. Nothing about that drive looked different from 100 other drives either of them had already made before, on this same highway, at this same hour, in this same kind of light. They weren't reckless people. They weren't drunk. They hadn't ignored a single obvious warning sign because there wasn't one to ignore. They were simply tired, on a long, familiar, easy-feeling road that had never once asked anything difficult of them before. And for a few unremarkable seconds, their attention slipped exactly where the desert has been patiently waiting all along, mile marker after mile marker, for as long as this highway has existed. That's the real weight sitting underneath every statistic in this video. It isn't the ranking itself, and it isn't the 80 crashes logged in 3 years, or the 1,000+ names counted in an older tally, or even the decade-old designation that first put this exact stretch of road on the map for all the wrong reasons. It's the much simpler, much harder fact that this particular drive feels like absolutely nothing at all, right up until the moment it doesn't. And nearly everyone who has ever made this trip, including you, has felt that exact same reassuring nothing, without ever once stopping to ask what it might actually be covering up. If you're planning this drive anytime soon, do the one thing this entire video has been building toward. Treat the boredom as the warning, not the reward. Share this with whoever's riding shotgun with you next time, because the best version of this safety talk is the one you have before you leave the driveway, not the one you wish you'd had halfway across the Mojave.